There is a creature on this planet that does not kill its victims. It does something far worse. It keeps them alive. Welcome to Wild World Explorer, the channel where we go deep into the most extraordinary, most unsettling, and most fascinating corners of the natural world. Today we are talking about the Ichneumon Wasp, nature's most disturbing engineer. A creature so precisely designed that when Charles Darwin first studied it, he wrote a letter saying he could no longer believe in a kind and loving God. That is not a metaphor. That is history. Imagine walking through a quiet forest. Sunlight filters through the leaves. A slender, almost elegant insect lands on the bark of an old tree. It looks delicate, almost beautiful. It moves slowly, deliberately, like it knows exactly what it is doing, and it does, because right now it is searching. It is listening through the wood, with sensors so fine they can detect a living creature hidden several centimeters beneath the surface. And when it finds what it is looking for, something remarkable and deeply disturbing begins. This insect goes by the scientific name Ichneumonidae, a family name that covers one of the most diverse groups of creatures ever to walk, fly, or crawl across this earth. The name itself comes from the ancient Greek word meaning tracker, or one who follows the trail, and that name is earned because the Ichneumon wasp is perhaps the most relentless, most precisely engineered tracker in the insect world. Now you might hear the word wasp and picture something that buzzes around your lunch and ruins a perfectly good afternoon. The Ichneumon is nothing like that. It is quieter, more patient, more deliberate. It does not sting you. It is not interested in you at all. It has a far more specific target in mind. And it has spent millions of years perfecting the art of finding that target. What makes this creature so extraordinary and so deeply unsettling is not just what it does, but how perfectly it does it. Every part of its body, every behavior, every chemical it produces exists for one single purpose. A purpose that, by the end of this video, will make you look at the natural world in a completely different way. Stay with us, because this story gets stranger and more fascinating with every single step. So where exactly does this creature fit in the natural world? That is a question worth asking, because when you understand the family it belongs to, the whole story starts to make a lot more sense. The Ichneumon wasp belongs to the order Hymenoptera. That is the same grand family tree that includes bees, ants, and the common wasps you swat away at picnics. On the surface, that sounds almost comforting. Bees make honey, ants build cities. They seem almost friendly, almost useful. And then there is the Ichneumon, sitting quietly in the same family, doing something that feels like it belongs in a completely different world. Within Hymenoptera, the Ichneumon belongs to the family Ichneumonidae. And here is where things get truly remarkable. Ichneumonidae is not just a family. It is one of the largest animal families ever recorded on this planet. Scientists have identified somewhere around 100,000 species within this single family. 100,000. To put that in perspective, that is more species than the entire number of vertebrate animals on Earth. Every fish, every bird, every mammal, every reptile, every amphibian combined. And the Ichneumon family still gives them a run for their money. But here is the part that really stops you in your tracks. Scientists believe that number is just the beginning. Deep in tropical forests, hidden in bark and soil and leaf litter, there may be another 100,000 Ichneumon species that no human being has ever named, studied, or even seen. We are quite literally only halfway through discovering what this family contains. Now within that enormous family, there are thousands of genera and species, each one specialized for a particular host, a particular hunting method, a particular environment. Some are tiny, barely visible to the naked eye. Others are large enough to make you step back when they land near you. Some target moth caterpillars. Some go after beetles buried deep inside wood. Some even parasitize spiders. Each lineage has spent millions of years tuning itself into something almost incomprehensibly precise. This is not random diversity. This is what evolutionary success actually looks like. When a strategy works this well, nature does not stop at one version. It makes 10,000 versions, each one sharper than the last, and that strategy, the one that drove all of this extraordinary diversification, is the very thing that made Darwin uncomfortable. We are about to get into exactly where these wasps live, and why the places they choose tell us so much about how they hunt. A creature that diverse, that specialized, does not live in just one place. It lives everywhere, and that is not an exaggeration. Ichneumon wasps have been found on every continent on Earth except Antarctica. from the dense, humid rainforests of the Amazon, to the dry pine forests of northern Europe, to the high mountain meadows of Central Asia. If there is a forest, a field, a hedgerow, or a patch of woodland somewhere on this planet, there is almost certainly an Ichneumon wasp living in it. Hunting in it, raising its young inside something else that lives in it. But here is the thing about where they live. They do not choose a habitat because of the trees or the temperature or the rainfall. They choose a habitat because of one single factor. Their host is there. Wherever the caterpillar goes, the Ichneumon follows. Wherever the wood-boring beetle tunnels into a tree, the Ichneumon finds a way to reach it. The wasp's entire geography is defined not by landscape, but by the living creatures hidden within that landscape. In temperate forests, you will often find them moving slowly along tree trunks, pressing their bodies close to the bark, feeling for vibrations beneath the surface. Old-growth forests are particularly important. The older the tree, the more likely it shelters wood-boring larvae deep in its heartwood, and the more larvae, the more Ichneumon wasps circling patiently above. In tropical regions, the diversity explodes. Warm, wet forests packed with thousands of insect species mean thousands of potential hosts. Some researchers believe that tropical rainforests, particularly in South and Central America and in Southeast Asia, may hold the largest concentrations of undiscovered Ichneumon species anywhere on Earth. You could walk through a forest in Vietnam or Brazil today, look up at the canopy, and be watched by a species that no scientist has ever formally described. They also thrive in agricultural land, which has become both an opportunity and a complication. Fields full of crop eating caterpillars are essentially buffet tables for Ichneumon wasps. Farmers in many parts of the world have quietly relied on these wasps as natural pest controllers for centuries, without ever really understanding what they were watching. The Ichneumon lives among us in our gardens. Our forests are fields, hidden in plain sight, doing its work quietly, precisely, in a way that only becomes clear when you look very closely at what it actually is, and to understand what it truly is, you need to look at the body itself. When you finally see one up close, the first thing you notice is how slender it is. Almost delicate, the body is long and narrow, built not for strength but for precision. Some species are no bigger than a grain of rice. Others stretch several centimeters long, but regardless of size, they all share that same elegant, almost architectural shape, like something designed on a drawing board rather than grown in nature. The colors vary wildly across species. Some are plain black, others flash orange and yellow in the sunlight. Some have banded abdomens that make them look almost like tiny tigers moving through the grass. People see them and think they are beautiful. Then they find out what they do, and suddenly the beauty feels like a warning label. But the most extraordinary feature, the one that defines this entire family, is the ovipositor. This is the egg laying organ that extends from the rear of the female's body. In some species, it is barely noticeable. In others, it can be longer than the wasp's entire body. There are Ichneumon species whose ovipositor reaches 15 centimeters or more. It trails behind them like a thread, almost absurd in its length, until you understand what it is for. That ovipositor is not just a tube. It is a precision drilling instrument. The tip is hard enough to bore through solid wood. The wasp presses it against the bark, applies pressure, and slowly, steadily drives it downward through several centimeters of dense timber. No vibration, no tearing, just a slow, controlled descent towards something living in the dark below. How does it know where to drill? This is where the sensory equipment becomes extraordinary. The antennae of an Ichneumon wasp are packed with chemoreceptors, tiny sensors that can detect the chemical traces left by a larva hidden deep inside a tree. The wasp literally smells its way through solid wood. Beyond that, the body can detect vibrations, the faint movement of a living creature beneath the surface, processed through sensory organs along the legs and abdomen. The compound eyes give it sharp vision for navigating and spotting movement, but for hunting, it is the antennae and the body itself that do the real work. It does not see its target, it feels it, smells it, senses it through layers of bark and timber, and once it finds it, the drilling begins. And what happens next is where this story takes a turn that no one forgets. The Ichneumon wasp lives alone. There is no colony, no queen, no shared nest buzzing with activity. Each female moves through the world as a solitary operator, working entirely on her own, guided by instinct and chemistry rather than cooperation or community. You will never see a group of them hunting together. you will never see them build anything communal. Each one is self-contained, each one is complete, but solitary does not mean silent, and it certainly does not mean simple. Communication for the ichneumon happens almost entirely through chemistry. The female releases and reads chemical signals called pheromones. Invisible messages carried on the air that tell her where a potential mate has been. Whether a host has already been claimed by another female, and whether the territory around her is safe or threatened. She reads these signals through her antennae, those constantly moving, flickering sensors that never seem to stop working. Watch a female ichneumon move across bark and you will see the antennae tapping, sweeping, testing the air and the surface at the same time. She is reading a world that is completely invisible to us. Mating itself is brief and functional. The male finds the female through her chemical trail. There is no elaborate courtship display, no dance. No extended ritual. Contact is made, the transfer happens, and then both go their separate ways. The male plays no further role. He does not guard, he does not provide, he does not stay. The female carries everything she needs forward alone. What is fascinating to researchers is the level of assessment the female performs before committing to a host. She does not simply find a larva and drill immediately, she pauses. She taps, she circles, she seems to evaluate. Scientists have observed females spending several minutes examining a single patch of bark before deciding whether to invest the enormous energy required to drill through it. If something does not feel right, she moves on. The decision appears almost deliberate, almost considered. Is there something we might call judgment happening inside that small head? Researchers are genuinely divided on this. The behavior looks calculated, but whether it involves anything resembling awareness, or whether it is purely mechanical instinct running a complex program, remains one of the more quietly debated questions in insect biology. What we do know is this: when she finally commits, everything that follows is executed with a precision that leaves very little room for error. And the next step in that process is the one that changed how scientists think about nature itself. The ovipositor finds its mark, the drilling stops, and then with extraordinary precision, a single egg is deposited directly onto the body of the host larva waiting in the dark below. Just one egg. Placed carefully, deliberately, and then the female withdraws, seals the channel behind her and moves on. Her part is done. What happens next belongs entirely to what she left behind. The egg hatches. A tiny larva emerges. And here is where the story becomes something that is genuinely difficult to process. The young ichneumon larva does not simply begin feeding, it begins feeding strategically. It avoids the vital organs. It stays away from the heart, the brain, the systems that keep the host alive. It eats the fat reserves first. The non-essential tissue, the parts that can be consumed without killing the creature it lives inside. The host stays alive, paralyzed in some species by venom injected during oviposition, kept in a kind of suspended helpless state, but alive, still breathing, still functioning at a basic level because a dead host rots. A dead host becomes dangerous. The larva needs fresh, living tissue for as long as possible, so the system is designed through millions of years of evolution to keep the host alive until the very last moment. Beyond that, the larva produces chemicals that actively suppress the host's immune system. The host's body would normally fight back against a foreign invader. White blood cells would mobilize. Defense mechanisms would activate, but the ichneumon larva releases compounds that essentially switch those defenses off. It does not just live inside the host, it rewrites the host's biology to make itself welcome. This process takes days, sometimes weeks depending on the species. The larva grows, it feeds, the host slowly, quietly diminishes. And then when the larva is ready to pupate, when it has taken everything it needs, the vital organs are finally consumed. The host dies, the fully grown ichneumon larva forms its cocoon, often right there inside the hollow shell of what used to be a living creature. And from that cocoon, a new adult wasp eventually emerges, climbs out into the light, and begins the whole cycle again. It is brutal. It is precise. It is, from a purely biological standpoint, one of the most sophisticated reproductive strategies ever recorded in the natural world. And it has been happening quietly in forests and fields around you for over 100 million years. Now we arrive at the part of this story that goes beyond biology, because the Ichneumon wasp has not only disturbed scientists, it has disturbed theologians, philosophers, and storytellers for centuries. In 1860, 1 year after Charles Darwin published his theory of evolution, he wrote a letter to the American botanist Gray. In that letter, Darwin described his struggle with the idea of a benevolent God. He wrote that he could not persuade himself that a God who was both good and powerful would have deliberately created a creature like the Ichneumon Wasp, designed specifically to feed from within the living bodies of other creatures. That letter became one of the most quoted pieces of writing in the history of the relationship between science and religion. One small wasp, and it cracked open a question that philosophers are still arguing about today. But the mysteries do not stop at theology. There are species of Ichneumon wasp whose complete life cycle has never been observed by any scientist. We know they exist, we have collected their adult forms, but what host they use, how their larvae develop. What precisely happens inside the host body remains entirely undocumented, in a world where we feel we know so much. There are animals that have kept their most intimate secrets completely hidden from us. There is also a deeply unresolved question about the host experience. When a caterpillar is paralyzed and slowly consumed from the inside over a period of days, does it experience anything? Insect pain is a contested area of research. Some scientists argue that insects have no capacity for subjective suffering. Others point to behavioral responses and nervous system complexity in certain species that suggest the picture may be more complicated. We do not have a clean answer. And that uncertainty, that open question sitting at the center of this entire story, is perhaps the most unsettling thing about the Ichneumon wasp of all. There are also documented cases of hyperparasitism, where a second Ichneumon species lays its own egg inside a host that is already carrying Ichneumon larvae. One parasite living inside another parasite, inside a host that is still alive. Layers of biological horror stacked inside each other like something from a nightmare. Nature did not design this to disturb us. It simply followed the logic of survival to its most extreme conclusion, and that conclusion leads us, finally, to the question of what happens to this creature now, in a world that is changing faster than evolution can keep up with. The Ichneumon wasp is not endangered, not officially. Most species within the family Ichneumonidae do not appear on any conservation watch list, and that might sound like good news. But it is actually a sign of something more troubling. We cannot protect what we have not yet named. And as we established earlier, scientists believe roughly half of all Ichneumon species have never been formally discovered. They exist in forests that are disappearing faster than researchers can explore them. Every hectare of rainforest cleared in South America. In Southeast Asia, in Central Africa, is not just trees coming down. It is an entire web of relationships being severed. The specific caterpillar that a specific Ichneumon species has spent millions of years evolving to target may live only in that forest. In that region, on that particular tree, when the tree goes, the caterpillar goes, and when the caterpillar goes, the Ichneumon that depends on it goes too, quietly, without any headline, without any record that it ever existed at all. Climate change adds another layer of pressure. As temperatures shift, the timing of insect life cycles changes. The moment a caterpillar hatches, the window when it is vulnerable, may no longer align with the moment the Ichneumon female is ready to hunt. These two creatures, locked in a biological relationship refined over millions of years, are now being pulled apart by a force that neither of them has the evolutionary time to adapt to. And here is the bitter irony. The Ichneumon wasp, this creature that disturbed Darwin, that seems so cold and mechanical and ruthless, is actually one of the most important pest control systems on this planet. Without it, populations of crop destroying insects would surge. Forests would be overwhelmed by wood-boring beetles. The balance that feels invisible to us is held in place, in part, by a wasp with a long needle and a very specific purpose. Nature is not cruel, it is not kind either, it is simply precise. The Ichneumon wasp does not enjoy what it does. It does not feel anything about it at all. It simply executes a design refined by time itself. A design so effective it survived for over 100 million years. The real question is not whether we find it disturbing. The real question is whether we are paying enough attention to protect a world this intricate before we lose it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Wild World Explorer. If this story made you see the natural world a little differently, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And there are many more extraordinary creatures waiting to be discovered right here.